Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Tejas Venkatesh joining you live from Nama Bengaluru. Welcome to this third and the final edition of webinars this year from Semaphore AI, where we are introducing you to Semaphore AI's enterprise AI agent platform, where you can build, test, deploy AI agents at scale within your enterprise. So, thank you so much for joining this. It's almost Christmas, it's almost holiday season, and it's almost New Year. But what an incredible year this has been with generative AI and everything AI and so many innovations, incredible innovations this year. But there are hardly any customers, any enterprises that have meaningfully adopted the beautiful technologies within the productions. And there are a lot of reasons to it, right? However, today I'm super excited to host this webinar along with some of the brilliant minds and also a real customer, which is going to share some inspiring stories about how did they begin their AI agents and how successful they have been in using and deploying this at scale. So before we get started, a quick introduction on what has happened so far. We have had two webinars until now where we introduce you to the platform, the power of AI agents, and we had a technical deep dive, which was super hit, super famous. It has already gotten 5 times our general number of viewers on YouTube. People loved the in-depth session of product and its capability, starting from building to actually operating and working with AI agents via a real world use case. So today we are going to hear about how this AI agent works in a real enterprise environment and its benefits and how the journey leading up to that particular production moment. So I'm really happy to introduce you to Ram, our co-founder, who's going to give us an insight of how customers are using. And through the sessions, we will also introduce you to an inspiring pioneer in this space, has been a leader in automation and now spearheading AI agents and its transformative capabilities in Emerson, Paul, who will also join us pretty soon. But before that, let's welcome Ram, our co-founder and CTO. Hi, Ram. Good morning. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, Tejas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. We're going to stay with the Venkatesh theme here. So I'm Ram Venkatesh. I'm CTO here at Semaphore. We're super excited to talk to you today about the customer perspectives, right? As Tejas was saying, the first two sessions they were about our perspective on the market and sort of, what need do we want to go after and how is the product going to deliver on that and so on and so forth. But it's really about how you, the customer, actually adopt the technology that's going to make a meaningful difference in your enterprise, right? That's the exciting part. That's where we go on these journeys. As Rob Bearden, our CEO, put it, we do believe that enterprise agents are going to be the killer app for Gen AI in the enterprise, right? This is where productivity and sort of the way you go after knowledge work is going to get redefined. To share a little bit more perspective on that, over this very hectic and crazy year, we've had the privilege of speaking with more than probably 100 Fortune 2000 enterprise companies about the way they think about their agentic enterprise and why they would like to adopt agents in the context of Gen AI. And this is you. This is sort of what that picture looks like, is what we've heard loud and clear. Your landscape is usually, it's pretty heterogeneous. You don't have one of anything anymore, right? So you have, if you think of your data estates, used to be you would have a single warehouse or a single data lake. Now you have a few of those. You also have semi-structured content. You have unstructured data. You have operational data that you're trying to also go after in the context of these use cases. So that itself is pretty diverse. And then if you think of your backend infrastructure, again, there's the ERP style line of business systems, but typically you also have multiple domain specific line of business systems that you need to go across. You have one or more workflow platforms that you have embraced at scale. There's always the CRM, sales, and support side of the house. And finally, the little box in the bottom all this work happens actually in Excel, or if it's, say, next generation enterprise in Office 365 or Google Suite. And that's where your humans are pulling all of the dots across all of these different um, facets in your landscape, if you will, to actually get the work done. So the promise of agents is really that we can now finally go after work that's done at that higher layer, where you do have to go across the different entities that you're trying to coordinate or orchestrate. Right? So the promise here is that you will be able to deploy agents to achieve the outcomes that you are going after in a data-driven way, right? At that layer where humans and agents can cooperate together to go to work across these different silos that make up your enterprise, right? So if you think of some of the ideal design patterns for this type of a framing of the problem, this first bucket is where we have spent a lot of time with our design partners this year. This is, complex, let's call it domain-specific work, right? So if you're an energy company, if you're a manufacturer like Emerson is, right? So the way you specify the work that's specific to the business processes, the rules, the constraints of your domain, our agents have the ability to understand this work at the level that we could actually go ahead and have that be performed by an agent, right? So this is work that only you could specify. And the second bucket is the kinds of work that requires automation or orchestration across the teams and systems that you have, where you might be, for example, looking to manage product inventory allocation or decisions of that nature. Typically, there's an ERP involved, but you have people in your commercial teams who need to bring this information, visualize it, make some decisions based on it, and then have those decisions be reflected in the backend systems at the end of the day. And finally, from sort of data background, this is a very familiar problem for us, is that connecting the dots across multiple data silos has never been easy. And with more silos cropping up, this has only gotten more challenging in the past. The other thing we've realized is, even though there's a lot of appetite and interest in predictive analytics, it's been really hard for people to actually deploy predictive analytics solutions at scale from an analytics standpoint. So we have a number of customers who essentially are making sort of tactical logistical decisions, right? What are we going to carry in inventory next week? What are we going to produce for the next month, right? So these short-term commentary, short-term forecasts that actually require some level of being able to analyze historical data, being able to look at the operational data that's current in your systems, and being able to make some predictions about what you see the next immediate time horizon looking like. And doing all of that in an agentic way lets you span these systems and compose answers and make predictions across all of them. So these are sort of three broad patterns of work that we have been seeing in our customer cohort. So with that, if you think of our agentic thesis, right, how do we view the world? What kinds of agents do we think people are going to construct using Semaphore? So the first place is, this is where we have a very opinionated point of view, and that's different from how others could be looking at this space, right? The agentic enterprise, we believe, this is about you specifying your purpose work, right? This is work that's done by your domain experts, your workflows, and your data with purpose-built agents. So if you start at the top level, that means that only you can construct these agents. That's the premise that we are basing our agent platform around, right? So the idea is that we are not providing purpose-built agents that you can readily consume, because no one knows your domain with the depth and flexibility that you need for it to be operational in your infrastructure. So it's your work specified in the way that's appropriate for you. We just enable you to create agents that embody that work. For us, this is the second topic. We have gone into this in a lot of depth in the product webinar section before. I'd encourage you to take a look at that if there's still questions around this piece. We believe that what's new and unique about agents is really, it's this trifecta of things. That is flexible reasoning that you need to specify this work that's not always going to be something that you could translate in a very deterministic way, you do need access to the full enterprise context. What I mean by this is all of the data sources that you need to actually have this reasoning be contextualized for your environment. And finally, at the end of the day, the agents need to be able to do the work, right? So this is not just about us giving you an insight or providing you, something like a chatbot or an assistant, but that the agent should be able to, with some level of constrained autonomy, be able to take an intent and actually perform that function from an end-to-end perspective. So if our agents have to do the work, right, so we are very convicted that these agent outcomes are best authored by the line of business person, right? So we believe that these agents are going to be created not by sort of full stack AI developers, if you will, but that the core of the work, what needs to actually happen, is going to be specified, it's going to be authored by the line of business person. They are the ones who best understand the work. This movie has never ended well when they have had to go translate what is in their vernacular over in IT and then have that be the embodiment of the work. The big unlock with agents is that they can specify the work in natural language. This gives the agent the proper level of both specificity as well as flexibility to describe the work in a way that can be performed by that line of business person. So that's sort of the human side of it, right? Where the flexibility is paramount. The other side of the coin is that agents must be deployable like software, right? So at runtime, we believe that these agents they have to behave like good software. So you need to be able to bring them up and upgrade them and roll back and all of the standard software functions. You need to be able to scale them as the amount of work that they have to do increases or decreases. You need to be able to monitor them and manage them and operate them as software. Right? So that's another key part of our agentic thesis. And finally, we do believe that what differentiates semaphore agents from other ways that you could be thinking about constructing agents is that our agents derive their accuracy from the underlying data representations that we interact with. Or you put it another way, agents without data are like human analysts without Excel. And we all know how important data models are to making the life of the analyst be productive. The same is true for agents. A very quick snapshot of what our enterprise AI agent platform is. So this is, we provide all of the capabilities for the full life cycle for how you think about creating enterprise agents, all the way from authoring and building them, running and managing them, and finally working with the agents. The two bookends of our platform are aimed squarely at business owners. So the business process owner, the process architect, is the person who is going to be defining the agent in Studio. And finally, the agent is going to actually interact with the human in the construct that we call the workroom. So this is where the process analyst can get a view of how well the agent is performing. If the agent got stuck on a particular piece of work, how far did they get? So you can pick it up and continue from there, or even in some cases, assign more work to the agent that then the agent can take up and complete. And the stuff in between, right? This is where we want the agent to behave like software, right? So these are the ways to construct an agent. There's an immutable agent spec that drives the definition of the agent that gets deployed into the control room and can be managed by an operator. And finally, all of this, given the enterprise customer base that we are going after, we understand completely that you need this perfect balance between zero ops and full control. So we provide that for you by making sure that the entire agent platform actually runs within your VPC. Our control room is just about control and orchestration. And so in a snapshot, that is sort of what the Semaphore agent platform looks like. I want to give you a brief vignette of one use case, and then we really want to get to the main course here, which is looking forward to the conversation with Paul Ferguson at Emerson. So the use case I want to highlight before we jump into that is this comes from another customer who's essentially, they are using the platform to create agents that are going to drive energy invoice processing, right? So the challenge that they have was they have 500 to 600 fairly complex invoice types in PDF format. For reference, I think previous attempts to automate a process like this were really challenging for them because they could probably only read about half of these invoices predictably. So if you can't even read the invoices, it's really hard to get to step two of the work. These invoices embody complex domain-specific logic, which is what they specify in the runbook. And these were invoices that they were taking hours to process. And further, from a root cause standpoint, it was really hard for them to understand, where the process was working well and where it was actually breaking down. So the solution for them was with the new vision models, we are able to bring the power of the multimodal extraction to the problem of recognizing the invoices. The first challenge they gave us was, let's make sure you can read all these invoices with a high enough level of accuracy before you can get to step two. Post that, right? So there is now automated validation, automated reconciliation. We capture the understanding of the invoice. So fundamentally for them, processing invoices is not so much about, it's not a parsing problem, but it's an understanding problem, right? So once they describe how the human understands the invoice, that is the key piece of insight that actually drives how the agent is going to be able to process this invoice with the same level of fidelity or accuracy. So the outcomes from this particular deployment were extremely encouraging for the customer. So they were able to get a very, very high degree of accuracy. Reconciliation happened in seconds. Right? So this really gave them the confidence that, yes, we can have agents actually deployed for these kinds of work where repeatability, determinism, accuracy, these are things that are top of mind for them to actually implement this invoice, this use case. So with that as background and framing of the kinds of things that you could do with some of our agents, right? We also want to kind of give you the call to action as you're thinking about this webinar, right? Is if you have an enterprise use case in mind, we highly encourage you to, contact us about our rapid agent deployment program. This is extremely tuned towards thinking about production enterprise use cases where you should be able to, in a small number of months, right, probably like 4 to 8 weeks typically, you should be able to go on this journey of taking a use case, using our platform to specify that, deploying that locally using Studio, right? That gives you a very standalone way for you to understand what the end user experience is going to look like, and then rapidly take this particular agent into production so you can see the end-to-end flow of how you will actually have one of these agents behave in production. So this is a program that we piloted starting the middle of the year. Our first cohort of 6 enterprise customers, for the most part, they're completely done with this. A few of them are already in production. The rest of this cohort, we are aiming for them to be in production somewhere between now and the end of Q1 of next year. Our second cohort, probably twice that number, they're also quite a ways down the same pathway, right? From the previous webinar, I know that we got a lot of interest in getting access to our agent platform. I want to acknowledge we're really thankful and appreciative for your interest. We are very capacity constrained. The one thing we just request is that as long as it's a very qualified enterprise use case, which can meet this kind of a time horizon for you, we encourage you to contact us. We are looking for ways to expand the number of folks that we can actually bring in a much more scalable way in the first part of next year. Stay tuned for that. So with that, I'd like to really jump into the main event here today. And I've been looking forward to this conversation, Paul, for a while now. We're so glad that you could join us today on this webinar. Paul Ferguson from Emerson. I'll have you introduce yourself in a minute. But they were among the earliest folks who joined our first cohort of design partners. And it's been an amazing journey over this last 6 months for us to learn about you and your environment and how you've been thinking about agents and getting you all the way through to production. So thank you for your partnership, for your cooperation, for your support. And with that, let me turn it over to you. Would you like to introduce yourself for our audience?
Yeah, sure. Hey, thanks, Ron. Thanks for inviting me. So like Ron said, my name is Paul Ferguson, VP of our Global Business Services, and so I've been with Emerson about 15 years now. Started in the finance space. They had a number of roles throughout the way, and just to put in context a little bit about Emerson, it's probably one of those big companies that you may not always hear of because it's behind the scenes in a lot of cases of delivering things like critical infrastructure and life sciences, et cetera. But large multinational, 20 billion sales, 70 billion market cap, about 80,000 employees. And in global business services, really our role is enabling and supporting the business to achieve their potential by performing a lot of the back office transactional processes. And so we have about 8,000 people in our main global business service delivery centers in Manila, Cluj, and Costa Rica. And we see agents as a key enabler to be able to unlock potential going forward. So I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Wow, as you're describing sort of the profile of the company and the opportunity, I'm thinking there must be it'd be fascinating to hear about the journey in automation for you and for Emerson, right? In terms of sort of how you started with automation. This is clearly not your first rodeo. Can you share some of how that journey has evolved over time?
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, right? And journey is definitely the right word. And so when you think about at least the way Emerson and a lot of companies like Emerson have been built over time, it's been through acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a lot of disparate ERPs. And as you know, things go, that industry goes in cycles in terms of ERPs, right? And so there's a big push, if everyone remembers, all the way back to Y2K. And so a lot of stuff got moved into, maybe that was an opportunity to put something into a new ERP at that point in time. And then obviously now, if you were going to go in that space, you'd probably go into cloud, right? And the cloud offers you all that goodness that's there today around analytics, big data, et cetera, right? But most of our businesses are still in the ERPs from back in the 2000 range, and so we certainly leverage all the features that we can within those ERPs. But there's a lot of work that we need to do around the fringes in order to make our processes efficient. And so our really first, I would say, from a business user perspective, right? I mean, certainly there's been people working in ERPs a long time that have done a lot of things to connect systems. But from a business user perspective, our first really technology that came available for us was RPA, like 2015, 2016, right? And of course, before that, there's like Excel and macros and all that kind of stuff, right?
The ghost of automation past.
Yeah, exactly. It still sometimes exists today, unfortunately. But RPA, I think the promise was this is gonna do all the work that you have employees doing that are very manual, kind of butter passing type jobs, right? And what we learned from there is it was a good endeavor, but RPA had its limitations, very like task. If it's very rules based, very rudimentary, very like task oriented, RPA could be a good solution. It had some fragileness to it, but that was really the first way we got really jumped in. And it was a good way to jump in and learn kind of how this comes together, because now as you start looking at agents, there's a connection point there with RPA, and really just kind of expands the capabilities. I kind of think of RPA it's kind of the arms and legs, and now you have agents that can actually kind of coordinate, make decisions, manage those RPA type solutions in ways that a person can, right? And so that's where we think again, why I think if you're in a GBS space or global business services or shared services, like this is one of those technologies that I think can be transformational for the GBS organization.
It's interesting. So on the RPA front, I guess question is like, if you were to look back and say, what are some key successes you think where you were able to really like, derive a lot of value to the business, right? I think because that automation, the promise of RPA was a lot of success for these kinds of tasks that you're pointing out, these highly rigid toil, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly where we had the success, right? Was with their so things like account reconciliations or even to a certain extent, you mentioned invoice processing earlier, right? I mean, there's some portions of the process that we could do there, and customer order entry, right? Things that were, if all the information was ready and available and all you had to do was go enter it into the system, those are the things that worked well. But and then we also learned things that didn't work well, right? I mean, we tried to do end-to-end processes using RPA, and it just was a struggle. And then we also learned with it was, so just me personally, right? That also, as we eventually got into the platform RoboCorp, which then Semaphore acquired, right? It really opened up my knowledge, I guess, or expanded my knowledge into open source, and the benefits that provides, the ability to just kind of plug and play and move things around as and when needed, and the potential that having it built on a open source Python type language, just, and now you fast forward to what's available now, it turned out to be a lesson learned that was a better world to live in than more of the captive type closed solutions.
So were you coming in from like a low code visual designer kind of environment? That must have been a big change to get from that to Python, especially before all of these copilots were around, right? Yeah.
It was, I would say though, we went from one that was very visual drag and drop type scenario. So it was it was a good tool at the right time to get in and get started. But it had ultimately some limitations that you didn't have those limitations in the code type scenarios, right? But with Robot Framework, which was part of RoboCorp, right? It came almost more like it was certainly coding, but there's a lot of like just scripting with keywords, right? And so you could, as a process owner. And that's why I get really like this stuff, because as a process, owner, if I can describe a process in a language that then can be executed, like that's extremely powerful. And I think that's kind of where we're headed, right? Where these process improvement teams and the developers start to merge together, because it's really about how do I describe the process the way I want it, the way it runs, the way the process executors are resonates within, and then being able to have developers take that and also turn it into code that can be executed and monitored and measured and all that stuff. Like that is really interesting to us.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like that was, so your progression was your RPA. You went to, I want to call this like automation 2.0, which is this open source Python-based environment where you were looking for, primarily, is it the ecosystem and speed? Is that kind of what that gave you when you went to?
It really was speed at the time, right? And then I think we learned, and there's a lot of, once you get into that environment, there's a lot of libraries you can tap into that you don't have to recreate, right? That was some of the lessons, I guess, still looking back to the lessons learned and challenges, was that what we were building in our RPA 1.0 tool processes were in the actions that we would need were a lot of the same actions across multiple businesses, right? But everyone kind of had to create their own. as you get in the open source world, you kind of learn like, I mean, there's a lot that you can leverage from what's already out there.
Correct. Correct. And also just having these behave more like software so you can deploy and reuse more
Yeah.
consistent. So then
Yep.
that got you to agents this year, right?
Yeah.
On that. So how did you get to, what was the trigger there when you think of automation as
Well, I gotta admit, if I'm being candid, right? When I
Sure.
first heard it, I was like, isn't this just like RPA? Like, what's the difference, right? I mean,
Yeah.
or it was something, maybe I didn't fully appreciate it. And then it was at that, and then some before we were engaged, with the team there, and really helped educate me and open my eyes to how the agents are much more, the capabilities are much greater than just your RPA. And so it's been, a quick lesson because now agents are everywhere in every marketing material, right?
That's so funny, right? It's like, I remember speaking with you. This was probably like really early, like maybe February or March timeframe. And I think that we were talking about like, okay, let's unpack what is an agent and what's agentic. And there was a conversation we were having. It felt like a new topic, right? We were both exploring that. And now fast forward and I get questions like, how are you different from XYZ? Just 6 months, it seems like just the market awareness and validation around the concept of agents. So do you see that internally as well, like with both inside your team?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And and so there's, some people will, and it's fine, not understand exactly even what a general agent is, or maybe not even fully understand RPA. You got some that certainly have more knowledge about that space, and they're like, and there is that initial confusion, I guess. So, well, how is an agent different than what we kind of already have? But as you educate and you show the potential, I guess, right? And obviously this all coincides with the rise of LLMs, right? Or how fast LLMs became popular and just readily available. You start combining that with RPA and you show agents. And I think with agents too, what's helped us is making very, discrete agents or vertical agents. So we're not just saying throw every use case into an agent and that agent can do everything and all, right? We're very specific about training an agent to do a specific type of process. And when you start to see how fast that's developing and how frankly, how more accurate it is than either current tools or even current processes we have, that's when I think the light bulb clicks.
Completely. I want to go back to something that you said, like as you are starting to see that differentiation between we're doing RPA for a while, we have some success here, this is agent thing, and we started off with skepticism, I think, which we should all have as to how is this actually going to change the work we do. If I were to ask you, like, what is your capstone thing that now you feel like, in one bullet, if I were to ask you that difference, right? What would you say is the biggest difference between automation as code and agentic automation?
I don't know if I guess this is maybe a hyphened word, 2 words, but decision making, right? Or and as I thinking through decision making training, right? Like you can train it. Now, certainly not. This isn't true for every type of role, but essentially, the way we train the agent is the way we train a new hire to do the same type of role, right? And so the ability to just train is really powerful. Oh, did I lose you?
Might have been my side. Hopefully it was my internet glitch and you're okay. Yeah.
It was a brief, I think.
Okay, awesome. No worries. So we just lost you for about the last 10 seconds of that, Paul.
Okay. I mean, the ability to train the agent the way we train a new hire using process, our business process documentation, that is really a significant change from the way we would do like just your traditional RPA.
So it is that run book, isn't it? That
Yeah.
central aspect of being able to define the work. And are you, yeah, so are you thinking of this, or are you seeing these run books being put together by the business user? Like this was one of our biggest, the founding thesis of run books, which
Yeah.
are like center for us, right? But how is that working out in reality for you?
Yeah. I mean, so far it's working well. I mean, we have a continuous improvement team. Think of them as like Six Sigma type resources, right? That are really, they partner with the process executors, right, at the delivery centers, and they set standards of how the process should be designed and executed. And so they can describe to you like how the process works, right, in English or natural language, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And having them be able to develop those run books and then see that now there's clearly a partnership there with the dev team, because even if you can describe the process, that doesn't mean the agent's going to be able to all of a sudden just log into Oracle and do whatever, right? I mean, you need to have, yeah, right. So you need to have clearly a partnership with the what we call an intelligent automation team to be able to develop those actions that then can be used in the description of the business process in the run book. But yeah, I mean, I think in the CI team so far, as they've gotten into it, they really like it. They see the potential, and it gives them an ability to say, have a platform to be able to describe the process and then see it come to life.
Yeah. I think that, this runbook story resonates very deeply with a number of our customers, right? So we have 3 very biased hypotheses about this process, how this is played out, right? So first one is, when we first started showing runbooks to people, they immediately assumed that there was going to be some AI magic that was going to go hit this runbook, right? Like, oh, show me the magic. And yes, we constantly improve sort of what AI assistance we can bring to bear. But the hypothesis I've seen is it's actually, if you could explain the work to somebody who has to do the work, that's not a complex thing. If it is, you're talking to somebody who doesn't know the work, in which case I don't think the AI is going to do much better either.
Right.
So the first one is that the 80% runbook is actually something that you can put together in a few hours or a day or two. Like this is not the giant part of the endeavor to go and try to automate, if you will, because writing good or synthesizing good run books, I think is very much a human skill that you can then sort of improve. Is that, now that you've sort of been through this process, you've seen some agents created with run books, is the construction process like what we assumed it was going to be, or how is that working for you?
Yeah, generally I think yes. I mean, of course, the devil's in the details, right? And so you can probably get to a part of the process and get it, and you can work towards a bigger end-to-end process over time. And so you can get something up and running pretty quick, and it's great to get started that way. But I would say, like, as you begin to make it more production ready and more larger end-to-end process, I think you want to spend a lot more time in your run book providing the details, making it more as specific as you can. And then I think that just gives you better odds for success as it goes and executes.
Yeah. And that sort of takes me to the second question is, look, again, the second piece is we think, if you think of the agent as broadly having brains and hands and feet to continue your analogy, but the runbooks, the brains, and the automation is the hands and feet, we think both are needed to have a functioning agent. But if you think of where 90% of the time is going to be spent over the life of the agent, we strongly believe that's going to be the runbook. Like, yes, you need ways to connect to your Oracle financials, but once you do that, you're not going to just swap that out for another system very quickly, right? So what was exciting for us when we started putting together runbooks was the idea of saying, now you can do continuous improvement, right? Which previously,
Right.
I would love to hear. This is the one piece that people have told me consistently, that continuous improvement, whether it was the LOBs, if you're deploying the backends, you had to wait for a release from the vendor before you got new functionality. Or if it was RPA, you had to kind of redo the process, which was always painful because you got to find the person who authored that in the first place and then modifying
Yeah.
that is a software process. Whereas here, it is changing a line of the runbook and just saying save and update and publish, and you're done, right? So are you seeing these runbooks sort of continuously morphing on a daily, weekly basis, or are you like super, since it's early days, you're being super controlled about that? How is change management around runbooks working for you?
Yeah, it is early days, and so we have a number of ones that we're, drafting now, but one that's essentially in production. And so I'll talk about the one that's in production. Yeah, and that's one where we do have the process team making updates to the runbook based on what they learned, or essentially what quote failed, right? It just means that transaction was, it wasn't trained well enough to understand how to read the transaction, right? But then the process team can go into the runbook, either update whatever instructions they did, provide examples of what that one looked like, the one that failed, and then the next time it comes up, it's successful, right? And so I see that's how this will roll out. Of course, every process maybe has a little bit nuanced, but I anticipate that we would have agents be kind of there would be someone that would have to monitor agents, and probably on the process side, that then can, do that reinforcement training. But they should be able to scale, right? And it's not like you should be able to do that across 20 some agents or something, right? And so it is, again, very similar to how you would, if you had a team of 20 people, it's kind of like now you're still managing the process. You just have a portion of it done by agents and a portion done by individuals.
That makes sense. And I think that is sort of the segue to the third act here would be, as you start to think about the accuracy of the agents that
Yeah.
you're about, right? We would love to understand, again, how are you thinking about, this is not something you had to worry about in the RPA land. It was either it worked or it didn't work, right?
Right.
So how are you thinking strategically about like the accuracy of these agents in your context?
Yeah, I mean, so for the one that we did in production, it's basically taking customer payments and matching them up against open customer invoices, right? To be able to show that those invoices have been paid, you can close it, right? Just to give you some numbers, when we were before the agent, we used a point solution from a bank, and we were at about 20% auto match rate. As we started to introduce the agent, provide more examples, we're at 80-90% success or accuracy. So phenomenal increase, right?
Wait. Let's go slow. This feels key. So
Yeah.
you're saying you went from 20% auto match, as in everything lined up perfectly, and the transaction was posted in the bank, to what is the number now?
80 to 90%. So huge, right? I mean, huge. Wow. And so that really proved that, yeah, we can continue to improve this, increase the accuracy, right? It didn't start at 80-90%. We built it up over time to get there, right? But that's a huge potential, because we have a lot of that kind of activity that we can look at and say, okay, how do we now start to really train or build and train agents to do this type of work? Because now we have a success story to be able to say, yeah, we did it. It worked over here. Let's get it. There's no reason why it shouldn't work in the same type of scenarios and other type of functions.
That's just an amazing result, I think. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry if I could jump. I mean, I think what I've seen too is AI agents, and this is one of the difference with RPA, are really good at unstructured data. They're really good at reading on whether it be in email and trying to get the intent or extract certain information that comes out of email that's scattered in different places from different emails that you receive, to just data where before you got to, if you just think of an Excel, right, you got to get everything lined up in table and rows in order to be able to do your lookups and all that kind of stuff. Right now with LLMs, and now agents can pull into that LLM model, it's more just put stuff into a blob or something, right, and just have the agents read it using the LLM model, that can then pull that data out in ways that then you can use downstream. And agents are really good at that. RPA just wouldn't, it would fail right away.
So how did you come up with this as the first use case for agentic automation? Is this something you had the metrics clearly to see what the off the shelf was, right? Was that part of the thing that drove you towards this use case?
Yeah, and it's just, if I take a step back broadly, right, like we look at things from a end-to-end process perspective, and we know, again, like you said, metrics, so we know, okay, what's our auto match rate versus like a world-class metric, and we know we're low. I think world-class is somewhere around 70%. And so when we see that we have those gaps, then it's like the CI team goes in and says, well, how do we go from where we are today to where we want to be closer to world class? And so we prioritize those use cases. This one was in the queue. And so just having our history of RPA, it's something that we should be able to automate portions of it. And so I think based on our previous history with RPA, with knowing what agents potentially could provide, it just seemed like it fit the scenario to be a good use case.
Understood. And from a team composition standpoint, do you have anyone who would have a title of AI engineer in your team?
No, not on my team, no. But we have a team of intelligent automation, which is kind of a mix of citizen developers and those that are kind of pro coders.
Yeah. So, I think in a sense, since you had done this two-stage journey, since you had gotten to automation with Python, I suspect the Python actions were in the same vernacular. What would your counsel be for someone who has not gone through that Python-based automation? Do you think coming over from the no-code tools to
Yeah.
we're talking about here, what would your counsel for them be?
Yeah, I mean, first I would say, like, if you have something that works, then I mean, don't break it, right? But I will say, like, once you cross that bridge, you'll realize that there's a lot more potential, and especially with scale, efficiency, cost. I think all those things are going to be in your favor if you get into more open source Python type world. And then again, just how fast this technology has taken off now with whether it be ChatGPT, Cloud A, whatever, right? There's so much you can do as being a non-coder to turn your natural language into code, right? I'm not suggesting that like everyone just is a coder, maybe, but I think the barrier to entry is a lot lower now.
True, absolutely. This is where I think now people can be dangerous with Python.
But yeah, now everyone's a Python coder, right?
There you go. But I think you're right that if we can give you like the 80% there to start with, and especially if it's an automation engineer, they can take that and they can definitely all the way through.
I would say like one of the things we did a lot with low code was like data transformation.
Yeah.
And as now as more familiar with Python, and there's library pandas, which many people may be aware of, right? I mean, it'll do everything that you can do for data cleansing or transformation. And the copilots, that's where I think copilots can be really helpful, is if you just say, hey, I'm trying to merge this data with that data, and it'll just write the code for you, and you'll start to figure it out over time. And then there's tools even embedded that I guess I'll throw like Data Wrangler as part of the Microsoft suite, where it's very much it's almost like a drag and drop within Python, right? So I don't know what this audience is, like what the makeup is, but if you're someone that's like, man, I'm just not a coder, I couldn't do this, I would say I think you can, at least you can do a portion of it.
Absolutely. And I think that, along the same lines, I guess, now that you have this one success under your belt, right? What is your 2025 agentic journey gonna look like? You had like a
everything, everything. No, it is, to me, this is the lever that we need to pull and we need to accelerate for transformation within the GBS space. I don't see any other path other than like, if you're going to say, look, let's just implement a whole new like ERP type solution, right? This to me is the number one opportunity to be able to drive efficiencies through these types of processes.
Absolutely. Paul, I really appreciate you taking us through the weeds of what stood out in your journey. I think it's the details matter on these things. It's not just the top line number, kind of how you got
Right.
there. Right. So it's super helpful. I see that there are a few questions in the chat that I think are more, people want to know more about kind of how you got there. Right. So let's see if we can hit a few of these quickly.
Sure. Let's see. Do you want me to just read them all?
I can read that for you,
Okay.
Paul. I think like a lot of questions are in and around the run book and its tuning itself. But before we get there, I think one question from Scott is about how did you get these run books and agents developed? Was that your own team, or was that upskilling your existing teams, or did you have a lot of help from Semaphore to begin with? And in either way, how do you upskill your citizen developers or your core teams?
Yes. So Semaphore partnered with us and they helped us build the first one. And we kind of did a two in a box type model, right? And so we had someone give a shout out to Tim. He did a great job building the run book. And so they helped us get the first one up, and they've still been a great partner for us. They're a great advisor as we go through this journey. But we are starting to. So the first one was we're kind of learning right from the Semaphore team. I'd say that the ones that we're now on were the CI team is starting to build those run books themselves and then going to Semaphore where they get stuck. And so I think that's how we've been building. They're starting, and it's been a good relationship so far. And I think that's the path we're going on. But ultimately, the goal is that we get people in house. We have resources to be able to build these run books, manage the agents themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. And the question about the run book itself, I think you have clearly answered, but still, how crucial is to get run book right, and how directly it is proportional to the outcome of your agent's behavior that you have seen in this journey so far.
Yeah, and the run book, I don't know, it wasn't clear for me. It took me, I had to see it in order to really understand what it was or what it is. So a run book is essentially a process narrative of the steps taken to execute a transaction and then process. And so again, that's where I think the CI team, they're the ones that can build those run books. They know the process, they know the process design, they know the best practice, they know gold standard. And then where they need to call action, they tap into the intelligent automation team. That's our model. Seems to work well, but I'm sure there could be other models. But I would suggest that the run book becomes kind of is managed by the business process owner, not the developing team. The developing team is really responsible for and owns all the actions that the business team needs in order to execute. That's my thoughts, but I'm happy to, always hear other thoughts and perspectives.
We violently agree. So I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah.
Great.
I saw something. Well, go ahead, Tejas, if you want to read them off.
Yeah, there's one question on LLMs, like which LLM did you use? And I think I will extend that question a bit further and like, would you in the future think of multiple LLMs, or would you stick with the one that you have?
Yeah, so within Emerson, we are well within the Azure stack, and that's our standard. So we use Azure OpenAI. But I will say then that and that's been the predominant LLM. I would say that we are exploring and most likely will get to some point more of a garden model where you can, even Azure is doing that now, right? You can pick your different model within Azure. So I think that's probably the path forward. And on that point, you know, we want to make sure we're smart and that we're not using, I don't know, a really sophisticated yet expensive LLM to do something that doesn't need it, right? And so we want to make sure that we are smart about that.
Cool. Ram, an extension to that point,
Yeah.
which is already a question here, is about the fine-tuning of
Yeah.
the LLM. Is that even required, or can you get the LLM to do the basics and then get the heavy lifting done by the runbook?
No, this is, tuning is a word that's tuning and training is abused in this context. Everything that they had to do, they could stay inside the purview of the runbook. Now they can provide examples. You can provide sample invocations. So you could say, in a sense, that is few shot examples are contained in the runbook. That is sort of the typical fine-tuning exercise that you would have to go through. But it's also about clarifying boundary conditions and things of that nature. That's where the real accuracy will come in. Because our agents are good at plan following. We don't want our agents to create plans for the business processes that we're talking about here. Right? Yeah.
Great. There's one last question, Paul, to you. It's about the auto matching. Okay, sorry. I think it was about the question of how do you move from the current percentage, say 20 to 80% to further up? Would you use fine-tuning of LLM or runbook? And I think the answer would be to keep experimenting with runbooks, iteratively go from where you are.
Actually, I want to just chime in on a little bit that what
Please.
Paul mentioned is that every failure is a learning opportunity. So the way we see these processes improving actually is not so much that we're going to train the LLM on a whole bunch of data, is that you understand where the failures happen and why, and those insights will drive process fixes or data fixes or things that actually need to be addressed. Right?
Cool. We are almost on time and all the attendees are still logged in, but we'll respect everybody's time. Any last questions and thoughts, Ram and Paul, that you would like to share?
I'm just super
I mean,
for the time today. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, both of you. And thank you everyone for tuning into this webinar. I wish you a very, very happy new year and happy holiday seasons. Next year is going to be a lot of agents, and I hope we can all work with agents together. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.